Hard to make sense of it all. The British Prime Minister now, yesterday, used that word daunted. We're not daunted. But we are daunted when it comes to this issue. We've every reason to be daunted. Greta Thunberg was speaking yesterday in the National Assembly in Paris. She's laid out the science that John knows in that IPCC report last October that you referred to, Conor, that to be safe we have to stay below 1.5, and that the carbon budget left for that is equivalent to 8 years of the current consumption. If we went up to a 2-degree rise, we might have 25 years, 26 years, but rather than the wheat yields going down 9%, they might fall 16 or 17%. Or the Mediterranean loss of fresh water might be similar, doubled the level of loss. And that's not even to mention the fact that we're sailing ever shallower, harder waters where the reef of those tipping points can strike the boat at any time. And we will not know until after the fact whether we've holed the boat. And the truth is, we're full steam. It's not like it's stopping. It's not like emissions are reducing. So we have every reason to be daunted. Greta Thunberg said yesterday, there's no middle ground when it comes to the climate and ecological crisis. And Joe, I have one suggestion on the back of that for the banner next year. It is no longer the question, can the centre hold? It's the question, can the entire centre move, change radically? That's what we need if we're to overcome this daunting feeling. The scale of the change, Richard, it's not equivalent to what happened in the last 10 years. I mean, it's great we pulled out of the crisis, but that was pulling out of the crisis where we were maintaining the system as is. We're going to have to change the entire system in a similar time period. That's the scale of the change. It's system change on a massive scale. And you're right, Conal, that can't be all put down to the individual. It's a mistake we in the environmental movement have made over the decades. Are you doing the right thing? Yes, we need to think like that, but actually we need to think far bigger and make it easier for people to do the right thing. And the job of managing system change is up to the political system. It's not impossible for us. It's not all bad as a country. Our figures are terrible. But actually, that question we asked to the Citizens' Assembly was the right question. How could we go from being laggards to being leaders? That's the key question. And they responded in a way that was undaunted. They took on that question and started to answer it in a way that I think has the possibility of setting us on a different course, a completely different course. And the Climate Committee, which I was proud to be on, and Richard, fair play to the All-Government Action Plan, which I think is the right approach. We work well in this country when everyone pulls together. We work well as a country when we're consistent over a 10, 20, 30-year period to make change. What happened with Whittaker and Lamass in that late 50s, 60s period, because we had this stable agreement around those objectives for 20 years following that, we were able to join the European Union, invest in education, bring in foreign direct investment. Its consistency works well in this country when we do it, when we want to change. And similar consistency we need now. We need 5 governments in a row to have this as their central mission, in my mind. And that's one of the reasons I'm talking to everyone, representing our political party, in the bar last night with Micheál, in a debate last week with Paul Murphy. Willingness to go into government because it's part of the leadership we need to effect change from the top down. But if there's one other message I want to give today, and I agree with you, Richard, completely when you said you have to have the ambition that everyone can share. Agreed. And I think we have come some bit of a way in our political system. In that committee, we pulled together a wee bit. But we cannot go into government, or we cannot have government, which is just about business as usual. And I'm sorry, in the All Government Climate Action Plan, a fatal flaw is that in the immediate next 5-10 years, its ambition is a 2% reduction per annum. And that's not good enough. That's not ambitious enough. That's not the system change we need. Another point on the governance. Yes, we need that bite of the Taoiseach's departments to effect change, but actually the real change is going to be the hands of communities and has to be in the hands of local government as well as central government. And Dermot, who was saying last night, you're absolutely right. The previous government and previous ones before it has made a fatal mistake in this country by filleting local government and weakening it at every turn. That's one of the governance changes that needs to take place. And use those good initiatives, Richard, the Renewables Investment Fund and the Urban Regeneration Fund. But rather than the Michael Ring big and home bags of cash which you throw around everywhere without any consideration of whether it's delivering system change, just I've got the money back from Dublin, lads, we actually need to target to put it in the centre of Glentees village and every town and village around this country. So we do what we said we want to do in the National Planning Framework, is bring people back into the core. The same in our urban areas. Coming together as a people is what the exclusive investment of those sort of funds, which should be given completely to local government to bid for, as to who's the best at these solutions, who's the best at greening their towns, who's the best at getting people living. A quarter of houses in rural Ireland are empty. Who's the best at turning that around and bringing life back into our cities? It has to be local, not just the bite of a Taoiseach's department. In energy, there's a lot of good targets. They could be more ambitious, but actually it's probably the best within the All Government Action Plan. You listen to a lot of the work we were doing in the Climate Committee. One thing that would change, I will eat my hat if within a year we have not stopped the issuing of new oil and gas exploration licences. I do not believe it will survive any programme for government negotiations, no matter who's in those negotiations, because there's a clear majority in the Dáil. That's one of the changes we will make, at no real cost to our people, at no loss of security. It may be bad for ExxonMobil or the Chinese offshore investment companies, so be it. But it will be no loss for us as a people. That one thing is going to change for sure. And then the real challenge is our homes. Walked down the road this morning, auctioneers, there are 22 houses advertised with the BR rating. There was only one B rating. And it's going to be tough, because it is going to cost 30, 40, whatever thousand to make those houses really warm and comfortable and healthy. And the price of the houses wasn't in many cases over 100,000, sometimes less. How do we do that? And I was watching this morning as I was walking along the road, there was a stream of Donegal registered vans heading out of Glentees to work where? How far were they driving? Hard-working, decent men and women. But the truth is, in terms of retrofitting our homes, we need immediately about 20,000 apprenticeships, workers, carpenters, fitters, energy engineers, and none of them are available. And it wasn't as if this has come as a surprise. It wasn't as if the Bord Panada decision yesterday to stop this completely unsustainable use of biomass in power generation should have come as a surprise. And only we're now rushing to the goal, God, we have to do a just transition. That's the real challenge. It's actually creating. How do we create the 20,000 jobs? How do we finance it? How do we make it? We start maybe in rural Ireland, because it's going to be very difficult to get a worker in Dublin or to put them up in Dublin. And we don't want people driving from Donegal down to Dublin every day to do up our homes. Why not start in Donegal as a first priority and keep people here and fill some of those quarter-empty houses with the workers who can do that task? In land use, Action 110 of the Climate Plan is critical, the mapping of what we do with our country. I think it needs to be more ambitious to actually setting out a real land use plan a real determined, what type of forestry do we want? If we're going to go to ramp up our forestry, which we need to do to store our carbon, to currently doubling and then doubling again, we cannot cover the country in monoculture, clear fell forests that will muddy our waters, destroy the fertility of the soil, and break communities. The entire forestry model has to change now. So we have... And it's the same in farming. The price of beef today in markets is $3.50 a kilo. It's just not working. We're trading on an origin green brand, and we're getting a commodity international base bargain price. And we're thrashing our land in the process, losing our birds, losing our insect life, losing the microbial activity life of the soil, which is the critical element of biodiversity that we need to take right down to that level. And the farmers are starting to wake up and realise this, starting to realise that this system change, this centre moving, one of the key movements we need to make is to say we need young people who are going to be stewards of our land, who are really knowledgeable about what happens with that corner of that field and what's the best crop for here, a whole range much more diverse rather than just relying on us competing against New Zealand or Brazil in international commodity markets in a world where the stability of their production systems is going to break down as climate change occurs. It's madness. It's not even paying our farmers properly. And that needs to change. Pádraig Fogarty speaking this afternoon. His book, Whittled Away, is a brilliant read of a review of what's happening in our biodiversity. He's a fantastic mind campaigner about this land use plan needing to really restore wilderness. And it's not just wilderness in the Connemara National Park it's everywhere. Every place matters. Every garden. It's not exclusive. It's not just all about the Amazon, it's about here at home. And the way he writes about it gives me hope, because he says it's not just paradise lost, it's the possibility of paradise regained. And this is something we all know of. Any of us here of a certain age, I'm old enough to remember what it was like before the industrial farming model that we've adopted in the last 40 or 50 years changed our land. And we can change back. And it's nature first in what we do in farming, but not just in farming, but in wilderness, in managing our land. This is not impossible. But lastly, we had a stakeholders meeting on land use on Monday. Clear, simple, most important part of that is community mapping. It's not just us turning Donegal into a wildlife reserve. It has to be with vibrant communities at the centre. We are not separate to nature. We are part of nature. We're connected to it. We are going to be stewards. For the weirdest thing, as we move into this Anthropocene, where man and woman is in control of the whole natural systems, actually it's not human-centred. It's moving towards being us connected to each other and to nature in a new way. In transport, and I've finished, oh God almighty. Just give me 2 minutes. Transport, the National Development Plan was signed off on by the government last year. There was not a single assessment of climate done on it. We've 51 major national motorways and roads in construction. We don't have a single public transport even ready to go to planning yet. The entire thing has to change. That was the big political row in the Dáil the last few weeks. All that row between Leo and Micheál Martin was around this subject, because Fine Gael thought they'd get a political advantage by saying, Fine Gael now agree with Fianna Fáil agree with the Greens, so we're going to have to change the National Development Plan. Damn right we're going to have to change the National Development Plan. And bring life, as I said, back to walking and cycling, and letting our kids be able to walk and cycle to school, and having a rural bus service as well as urban public transport systems. Industry has to change. One of the problems is we are fighting monopolies here. Who are our biggest companies? Anglo-Irish Beef Processors, Kerry Group, Glanbia, Ryanair, Cement Roadstone Holdings. It's not easy. It's not just the foreign international companies. Our own biggest companies have to change completely their business model. And the market system, the political system, had bought in over the last 20, 30 years, 40 years, That market knows best, our job is to step back and let the market. That's gone, that's shot, that's over as a political story. That's a me story. That's a me story. Me the market, me profit, me individualised optimisation, which has to be replaced by a we story. The we story is not Boris Johnson's one, which is we versus someone else. It is united. It is us as a people. I don't know how in God's name he's going to unite a country where he's going to try and unite it around Brexit. But we have to be united in this turbulent political world. And I think we can unite around the moving of the entire centre of our politics in this more sustainable direction. Greta Thunberg said yesterday that we have to unite behind the science. And it's true. It gives truth in terms of what measure of what we have to do. But actually, I think we need solutions that also come with a bit of soul. It's not just our heads that's going to make us overcome this daunting feeling. It's when our hearts are in the game as well that we really will make the change. Ilya Delio wrote that book, The Unbearable Wholeness of Being, which for me was inspiration in the last year as to how that evolutionary leap in our consciousness about connection might actually work. Charles Eisenstein has written A New Climate Story, which simply says it can't be all about the fight. It can't be all about fighting against Michael O'Leary and fighting against Richard or fighting against. It has to be coming together. That's the new story in this story of change. That's what can answer that thing, the best lack all conviction, the worst are full of passionate intensity. The conviction will come from this coming from our hearts and our souls as well as our heads. It is the only way to overcome the daunting fear you have that I can't answer this, I can't control it, I can't manage it, I'm scared of it. It's the conviction of us doing our bit to make this change will help that work. And I will finish with the line, because I think you put it really well when you started your words by saying, I see the world as glorious and full of splendour. I do too. And it's that sense of conviction around protecting everything that is glorious and splendid, even as it changes, even as it may fall apart. It's looking after our home, being part of caring for each other and nature is actually a centre, move of the centre that lifts your hearts, that raises our spirits, that removes that daunting feeling. Thank you.